you say landscape to somebody and they think pretty picture, a lake, a mountain, or just something that's nice but very easily dismissible. I think that's also a very one-dimensional and not very interesting view of natural systems, when in reality we're all embedded in them and they provide us with everything that we actually need to survive. And we've created a world where we can be unaware of that fact and still survive, which is crazy. There's a whole different way of looking at natural places that is not frivolous, and it's not shallow. It's not just about pretty or even about serenity. It can actually be danger or something very negative or fearful. So I like to bring a little bit more of that urgency back. I've always been drawn to the outdoors and being outside. Deciding where I'm actually going to sit down and paint is very intuitive. It's just about walking out the door and exploring until you find that perfect composition that just exists out there already. It's those slightly less obvious visual cues that I'm always looking for. So I usually tend to avoid extremely scenic or really obviously spectacular landscapes because there's not that much that I feel I have to say about it. So I actually almost feel like I'm not allowed to make paintings somewhere unless I've spent enough time there. I'm not just coming in as a tourist looking for the most dramatic or obvious landscape and painting it. I started out doing artwork really early. It was just something that I've grown up doing. Up until college, I've mostly been doing artwork indoors, so doing still lifes, doing artificial compositions that were either created for me or that I created out of pre-made objects. But then partway through college, I actually started doing watercolors. And the great thing about that is you can take very lightweight materials and just walk as far as you want and just paint whatever comes to mind as being interesting. So I usually will make one watercolor sketch outdoors in nature. It'll take about a couple hours. And then that's the only information other than what's in my head that I take back with me to my studio. So you're going from a sketch that's about this big to a panel that's 8 by 12. And the only way that I can recreate those memories is to simplify, flatten, and induce more repetition. I've been greatly inspired, for example, by medieval tapestries and how they take a very complex imagery that's in 3D space and flatten it into 2 dimensions. And you can tell that they haven't quite figured out how to make that perspective realistic yet. But I think that actually makes it so much more interesting and evocative in that they haven't yet come to this perfect 3D perspective that we all take for granted now in realistic painting. So painting large has started out as being a very intuitive thing that I've been drawn to, but as I've become more experienced and more explicit about why I make certain decisions in my paintings, it's also become a way to stop people from dismissing natural imagery as scenic, picturesque, the way that landscapes often are. I mean, I'm used to going to places that are very inaccessible, where you often can't see very far. They're very uncomfortable or fearful. And I don't like to dictate how people react to my paintings, but I'd like them to experience some of those stronger emotions that I have when I'm walking around in natural places that I have a lot of familiarity with. The starting process for these large compositions is really unglamorous. It's going to the hardware store, buying lumber, milling it to the right shape, hammering it together, bloodying my knuckles, like stretching canvas, stapling it on, really boring, repetitive, just painting it white with gesso. And then by the time you go through this several week process of making these canvases, you're so excited to start because it's been so boring. But the best time is early on. All you're thinking about is, I want to put this color here. I want to make this mark here. It feels so good to be doing that right now. So it's just sort of a primal joy that I have in doing that. It's completely unintellectual, and it's just something I love so much.